Politics show. The snow has just about stopped here in downtown Providence. It's still a little wet and wild out there, so if you're hitting the roads, be careful. Give yourself a little more time. But I'd like to welcome my first guest in, David Caprio, President and CEO of Children's Friend.
Thank you very much. Thanks. It's great to be here.
It's great to have you back in studio again for all the work that you do in the community. You're going to be up at the State House next week,
Yes.
looking particularly at testifying about the DCYF funding level. And just where things are at. We know DCYF is in crisis right now, and they're looking to level fund it.
Yes, that's what we're really concerned about, Kate. As you said, there's, we see the headlines all the time lately for the past couple of years about child deaths, young kids in Rhode Island dying because of abuse and neglect, and we've seen this too often over the past 2 years. And yet, DCYF took a $7 million budget cut in the current year, and they're looking to level fund it, which means that $7 million cut also carries into 2019. And what we're trying to say to people is these funding cuts and these budget cuts are absolutely linked to the bad outcomes that we are having in our child welfare system right now.
And DCYF just simply overburdened? Is the lack of staffing, just the inability to monitor, to keep tabs on these, oftentimes tenuous and difficult situations?
Right, so DCYF only gets called into the worst situations, and they really have to, in many cases, work miracles. And if they don't have enough resources, and if their staff is spread too thin, they can't get the job done. So we really need to resource this agency. Again, they only get called into the worst situations. We need to make sure that they have the resources to be able to do their job.
Let's talk again about level funding and the crisis facing the state here. We see the outrage and the sadness of every time there is a child fatality. We see elected officials say we can't let this happen. This is one child death is too many. And then we see it level funded. Is there a lack of, how can both the administration putting forth this budget proposal, and there's other elected officials who I'm sure are advocating for a funding increase, for the most vulnerable? Are we failing the most vulnerable in our state?
I believe we are. And I don't believe that anybody wants to, so I don't believe that the governor's budget or the General Assembly is looking for bad outcomes. They obviously are outraged like the rest of us when we have a bad outcome. I'm not sure that they have tied together that the budget directly impacts these bad outcomes. And that's what we're trying to get the message to people, that if DCYF is underfunded and continues to be underfunded, then we are going to continue to have these bad outcomes, which none of us want. And that's what needs to change.
And talk with us a little bit, we've had you here in studio before, David, about Children's Friend and your role in helping families in need across the state.
Sure. So Children's Friend is the oldest social service agency in the state, founded back in 1834, back in the India Point section of Providence, before there was a DCYF, before our government got involved in child welfare. And basically what we did at Children's Friend is we took abused and neglected and abandoned kids off the street. We gave them housing, but our founder also educated them. And so they had a safe place. They were getting an education for their future. And to this day, we still do adoption and foster care. But we also do a lot more now of community-based prevention work. We really try to work with families in their communities. We try to keep kids with their families, keep kids safe, keep families stable, and then, really they never enter the child welfare system, which is really a great outcome. But we still do work with that population that is in the child welfare system, and that's what we're really focused on right now, is let's get better outcomes for these kids.
And is that really at the crux of the issue of DCYF? Is it the staffing? You, I'm sure, work with DCYF all the time. Again, these workers there, I'm sure, have caseloads that are just overwhelming. Is that just the start of what really needs to be done to fix the problem?
I think the staffing, although the staffing has been addressed a little bit, I think there's still more staff that need to be added in certain areas, but resources in general, because you can have staff there, but they may have high caseloads. You may not have enough community providers or enough services in the community that can assist DCYF with the work they do. But I think over the past decade or so, you could pretty much put into 3 general buckets of what the issues are with our child welfare system and why we've had some of the bad outcomes. I think first is inconsistent leadership over at DCYF. We've had lots of different directors come in and go, and some of them have been more effective than others. I think we have a great director who's been here about a year. She has some great ideas. She's very qualified for the position. She's listening to the community. She's listening to her staff, and I think she really wants to make some of the needed changes. The problem is it's under-resourced. So I think the second biggest issue that has affected DCYF is that it's under-resourced, and it has consistently been under-resourced, and we're worried about that continuing. We have a great new director. Let's give her the resources that she needs to invest in the system and get better outcomes for our kids. And I think the third issue is, none of us live in isolation, and substance abuse and the opioid crisis absolutely has an impact on families and families with young kids, and we've seen some of that in some of these bad outcomes also.
So you're going to be up testifying at the DCYF hearing for the funding level. Any other legislative priorities this session that you're looking at as well?
Sure. So, I mean, by far, protecting our most vulnerable kids is the number one priority we have. This is a life or death situation for some of these kids, so that's our number one. But certainly, we're very interested in some of the early child care proposals. Again, getting the youngest kids and getting them learning and getting them to school at the same level as some of their more affluent peers is very important to us. So I think there's some great investments proposed in pre-K and in early childhood programs and in child care rates, all things that will help a lot of kids in our state. So we're focused on that too. But our number one priority is protecting kids in the child welfare system.
So you talk about last year taking that $7 million cut. Is that the basis point for, when you're up there and saying, don't level fund following this cut year, is it kind of reinstating at least that $7 million?
That's exactly what we're asking. We're asking, as a first step to this director, to give her a great start. Let's get that $7 million back in the system. So we're asking the General Assembly to put that $7 million back into the budget. It's not in the governor's proposed budget. It needs to be added in. And we're asking, all of our friends and supporters out there and all the people concerned with child welfare in the state to contact your state rep, contact your state representative, contact your state senator, and ask them, please, make this a priority in the budget. We need to increase the DCYF budget by $7 million, and that will help us reduce these terrible outcomes that we're achieving.
Well, I appreciate your taking the time to come into the studio today to tell viewers about this from the government relations perspective, because again, you see the stories, you see the headlines, you see the heartache, and you're really putting the policy side associated with it. Again, you can contact David Caprio and Children's Friend if you support what they are looking to do up at the General Assembly. Well, I appreciate your taking the time to come in, give us an update. Again, you'll be up there next week. We'll continue to follow the developments there with DCYF, but with all the work that you do in the community, David, I appreciate your taking the time to come in.
Thank you for the time, and thank you for all the attention you put on this.
Of course, David Caprio. Thank you so much. I'll let you go around the corner, and we'll welcome our next guest into the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. Don't go anywhere.